My name is Dr. Adrian Threlfall. I'm a military historian. I work part-time at the Shrine of Remembrance as an education officer, and I'm a history lecturer at Victoria University also. I was a private in the Australian Army, an infantryman, and my family has served in the Army since the Boer War and in most of the 20th century conflicts that the Australian Defence Force has been involved in. So you could say military is the family business. Why the shrine was built, when it was built, a little bit about the history obviously of Australia in the various 20th century conflicts and the conflicts that are continuing to involve Australians overseas. It was one of the few pieces of land in Melbourne, close to the city, that was not built upon, and it was an elevated location, and that was also deliberate. Designers decided they wanted a building that would be seen by Melbourne, by Melburnians, wherever they were in Melbourne. You could not help but look up onto this hill and see this building, and you would then be forced to remember. You see straight down this, the sight lines have been kept unaltered. Obviously there have been more buildings built post the Second World War, but the sight lines down Swanston Street and St Kilda Road are not built out, and so you can always see this building sitting up on the hill here. It was obviously built after the Great War, so after the 1914-1918 conflict. Thousands of memorials were built around Australia, and each of the states wanted to build a suitably large memorial that would remember the service and the sacrifice of those servicemen and women who went overseas and fought in the Great War. And so in 1927, construction started on this memorial and was completed on Remembrance Day, so November the 11th, 1934. General Sir John Monash, who was in charge of the Australian forces during the Great War, Australian Corps Commander, was also tasked after the war with this project. And this is the design that was eventually chosen, and the building that was built. And he chose that inscription as the most appropriate and long-lasting, he would have hoped. Basically to get people, or convince people that they needed to remember that service and that sacrifice of those hundreds of thousands of men and women. There are no longer any World War I veterans alive. There are very few Second World War veterans alive, and even the Korean War veterans of the 1950s or the Vietnam veterans of the 1960s are passing on, and so the shrine needed to transition to becoming a gallery and almost a museum space, as well as retaining its primary purpose, which is as a war memorial and a place for ceremonies and sanctuaries for the bereaved to come and remember their loved ones. The visitor centre here was built in 2003. It was felt that with our visitor numbers increasing, we needed a better entrance and a better way to move the increasing numbers of visitors, tourists, into the shrine. And as those generations that served in both the Great War and the Second World War passed on, it was felt that there needed to be some more interpretive panels and information panels so that people didn't just walk straight into the crypt or the sanctuary and didn't know the real purpose of this building. The Galleries of Remembrance has obviously only just been completed on Remembrance Day last year, and that includes materials covering all the conflicts that Victorians have been involved in. So really from 1851 through till today, World War I to World War II, Korea, Vietnam, through to Afghanistan and Iraq, so a much larger extension. We have exhibitions that change. There obviously are permanent exhibitions here that do not change, but there are exhibitions that change, and there's one in our Western gallery at the moment, which looks at and examines an archaeological dig at Gallipoli, so at Anzac Cove. And it was an archaeological dig involving Turkish and Australian battlefield archaeologists and scholars examining the battlefield and trying to find artefacts and look at this experience that obviously touched several nations, not just Turkey and Australia, and bring some of those artefacts to Australia so that we could see what people's forebears did and how they lived in those trenches for 8.5 months. There's the hilt of a bayonet that was found rusted and embedded in a tree. Artefacts of rusty barbed wire, obviously on any battlefield there's barbed wire all over the place. There's jam tin bombs, or fragments of jam tin bombs, homemade hand grenades basically that are 100 years old. The shrine was built after the Great War to remember those people's service and sacrifice, but because there have been multiple subsequent conflicts that Australians have been deployed to, there have been many other memorials built. The first of those was the Second World War forecourt to the north of this building, and then the post-1945 memorial, which covers all those conflicts, particularly Korea and Vietnam, but all the way up until Afghanistan and Iraq today. The statue of Cobbers, which is based on or replicates a statue at Threlfall, one of the most bloody battles that Australians were involved in 1916. There's a women's garden, obviously to remember women's service in various wars. A statue of Simpson and his donkey, which many of the school groups come and visit. And there are many other memorials for different units, different Air Force, Army and Navy units dotted throughout the reserve. This is Victoria's memorial. The people of the state of Victoria paid for this memorial. School children, people who were lost loved ones, and even those obviously who suffered during the Great Depression when this place was being built. They donated their money. So because this is Victoria's memorial, it will always be free. We hope that with increased attendance, people will make public donations so we can continue to fund services and particularly the educational programs and the exhibitions. I think for most people it's the focal point. Approximately 100,000 people were here for the dawn service, even though it was wet. I think this is where people come to remember. Obviously, many other communities also have small memorials, and they held services on Anzac Day too. This is a place where I come to think and to remember, and to hope that in the future we'll find better ways to solve international problems than by going to war.